Let's talk a little bit more about these periodized blocks of training. It's helpful for you to have at least a general understanding of what all of these blocks mean and why they're sequenced the way that they are in order to help communicate that message to your athletes if you're trying to get them to buy into training. So, as mentioned before, the sport you're training for and the amount of time that you have to prepare for your season will help dictate which blocks you're going to see and in what order you're going to see them. So for our speed power sports, such as football, this is a pretty typical progression if you have a long enough off season. We would start in a hypertrophy block, which primarily focuses on lean muscle mass development, and we'll come back to that in a second. Then we would get into strength capacity, strength, max strength, power, and then speed. So we'll be moving at higher velocities as we get closer to your season. Now, if you were training for something like a distance swim, that order might be different. We might start with an endurance block, go through hypertrophy, strength capacity, strength, power, and then finish again with another endurance block before we get to your season. Right. And again, this all depends on how much time you have to prepare and the sport that you're training for. So let me go back to that football. Actually, I wanted to go back to this football program, and we're going to talk a little bit more about each of these blocks specifically. So when we are training in hypertrophy, our main emphasis here, or our main focus, is on developing lean muscle mass. And there's many ways to develop lean muscle mass. We know through the literature and practical experience that these protocols of relatively high number of reps and total volume with moderate to shorter rest periods is a tried and true method for developing lean muscle mass. But it doesn't mean we're going to neglect explosive training. It doesn't mean that your athletes are not going to be getting stronger and increasing their strength. It just so happens that our primary focus is on lean muscle mass development. And as a side benefit, we get a lot of reps for your athletes, which then results in plenty of opportunities for them to practice these skills of squatting, of pressing, of Olympic movement derivatives, right? So in hypertrophy, you're going to see a lot of reps, moderate to shorter rest periods. Your athletes are probably going to be sore, especially if they have taken time off in between training programs and they're just starting back up again. As we get into strength capacity, we're going to increase the volume a little bit more and the density a little bit more. So we're going to have 5 sets typically. This is your classic 5x5 when we talk about our back squats. And the percentages are going to be increasing a little bit more than what you had seen in hypertrophy, right? So we're starting to get into those strength ranges, but we're still focused on developing work capacity. By doing these things up front during the first 6 weeks of this program, it's going to allow us to accomplish more work during our strength and max strength blocks when we're really trying to increase our top end force output. So we get into strength, the percentages continue to increase even more, the reps get fewer and fewer. So as we lift heavier weights, we're going to do less reps. The rest times get a little bit more generous so that you are resting adequately between sets. And you can see that the duration of these workouts might be increased because we need to allow enough time in between sets, and you're doing more sets within your training program, right? Then we can unload. Let me see here. This will be our first unload in this program. So we get to October 16th. We still have training programmed, but you can see they're a lot shorter. You're only doing 3 sets of each exercise. This is meant to be a time for us to take the foot off the gas, allow a full week of active recovery before we attack this next training block in max strength. So max strength training block is where we're going to see the highest amounts of weight. It's in the center of your off-season training. And so this is where you can expect your athletes to load up at their highest percentages of their 1 rep max. Again, plenty of rest in between sets, and we are going to have more sets so that we can work up to those highest loading percentages, right? Okay, and then as we get closer to the season, we start to change our focus into more power and speed. So the weights we're going to see more explosive movements. For our compound lifts, we're going to decrease the amount of weight that we're using and only have moderate to low reps because we want to focus more on velocity of movement rather than how much weight you can lift. So if you are going to be doing barbell pause back squats, you can emphasize to your athletes that we're more so focused on the speed at which you're moving the barbell rather than how much weight you can do at a slower pace, right? So you follow the recommendations that Volt gives you in terms of how much weight, and you execute these with control, but also at the highest velocity that you can. Same thing with speed. The weights just get even lower and you move even faster. We do this as we get closer to the season because we want to focus more on rate of force development and velocities, as those are going to be more quote unquote game specific as we transition to your competitive phase. Okay, then in season, I already talked about trying to maintain the athletic qualities that we've developed in our off season and stay healthy throughout our season and fresh as possible as we get towards the end. And then transitional phase I've also covered with you in a previous module as well. So hopefully this gives you a little bit more context into the training design of your overall training program. And we can move on to the analytics section in future modules.